So, hey Tony, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Tony Warner from Black History Walks. We organise walks, talks, and films on Black history in London each month of the year, all year long for the last 17 years. We have about 17 different walking tours in North, East, South, and West. And we show people on a 2 hour trip the Black history in Mayfair or Trafalgar Square or Regent's Canal or Elephant and Castle. Apart from doing walking tours, we also do presentations and talks in libraries and youth etc. And the presentations can be on Black people, World War One and World War Two, can be on Black science fiction, can be on African superheroes. So we have a number of interactive talks about different topics we should do all along as well. We also show films at a place called the BFI South Bank, which is not from Waterloo. And every month of the year for the last 17 years, we show an African diaspora film. It could be from Cuba or Indonesia. We could be looking at the fight against the British Empire or Black women resistance leaders. So we show films at that location. Plus, every now and again, we put up plaques. So we actually use our platform to raise money and identify the sites of the locations of famous Black people. And the last plaque we did was to James Baldwin. That was just like 2 months ago. Prior to that time, we did a plaque to a guy called Dr. Cecil Belfield Clarke, who was a major civil rights leader back in the 1930s in the UK. So we also have a Black History bus tour that drives around London for 3 hours. We also have a Black History river cruise that goes up and down River Thames for 3 hours. It goes from Embankment to Greenwich to Temple and back. And we show people the Black history on the river itself. Plus, we have people in costume and character from history who tell their stories as we go up and down. We have a bit of a dance towards the end. We also have a Black History canal cruise on the Regent's Canal behind King's Cross, which shows you the Black history on the canal. We've now launched Black History helicopter tours. We fly over London for about an hour or so and show the history from 1,000 feet up. And apart from that, we have 2 books out. One is a GCSE Pearson exam textbook for use in schools, which is based on a Notting Hill walk. It's now used by 10,000 pupils in 140 schools across the country, and that's gone down really well in the schools. The kids love to learn about the history. And we also have a book out titled, got it here actually, Black History Walks Volume 1, which is 2.5 of our 17 walking tours in the book form. And it's also on Audible, and I think that's all that we do.
What a fantastic intro. I think one thing I definitely learned from there is just the versatile ways in which history can be explored, like walks and canal tours, helicopters, etc. That sounds amazing. And that is definitely something I want to participate in the future. And that book, by the way, when was it published?
All right, so this is the victim of the pandemic. This should have come out in 2020, but guess what? It got delayed by about 2 years. So it came out, was published in 2022? But it was planned to come out in 2020 when they had in fact, the publisher of this book is a group called Jacaranda Books, which is a Black female-owned and run publishing company. And they had a plan to publish 20 Black British books in 1 year in the year 2020. It was called 2020, and it was going good. They got about 15, 16, 18 books out. And then, of course, the pandemic came along and mashed things up. But yeah, the book itself is part of history, and that is part of because no publishing company has ever produced 20 Black books in 1 year ever. And I'm talking about those big boys that are worth billions of pounds or dollars. But Jacaranda, a small press, had actually did it apart from the pandemic.
Wow. Not even 20. That is shocking, I think. I do know that a lot of Black writers who struggle in literature space and struggle with that acknowledgement of getting their books published, but I had no idea that number was so low. So you learn something new every day. And I do commend that publication for addressing that disparity and, wanted to change that. But that definitely does need to change because there's so many talented Black writers out there. So why do you think walking talks have become such a powerful way to teach Black history, and how do they help people connect with the past?
I think they've become a powerful tool because we've been pushing them for 17 years or so. We started with one walk in St. Paul's Bank area, and the first walk ever did had 2 people, yeah? And I was just going to kind of leave it as that. But the guys who came were so enthused and appreciative. They said we should do more. So start off with one, now you have 17, 18. We've got the river cruise, the bus tour, the canal cruise, the helicopter tour, and 2 books out. So I think they've become popular because we've pushed them and promoted them and made them kind of cool. Because when I first started, it wasn't like everyone's rushing to do a Black History Walk, Some people would refuse to come because they assumed or thought that we're going to talk about slavery for the whole 2 hours. And I'm like, well, we'll mention it, but it's not like the whole focus. And even if we did
Mm.
talk about slavery, we'd be talking about the resistance against the slave master. And people would had to be a little bit unbrainwashed to appreciate what took place on face-to-face walking to. And I think over a period of time, the word of mouth got around, and now you'll have, a Saturday school will come, a church group will come, office will come, because they've heard good things. So it's down to people's hard work.
Wow, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm really glad, sorry, that you touched on how people would frame, viewing Black history and be worried about the trauma and hearing like things that could be quite triggering. And I also
Mm.
appreciate how you flipped it to talk about the resilience and stuff, because it's not all, just about the pain, the grief. It is also about the fight against, structural and just how our institutions have been quite oppressive. I think, our
Yeah.
resilience about against that is just as important. So I'm sure a lot of people appreciated that, how you kind of
We,
reframed that for them.
we actually have a award titled "Fighting the Slave Master." That's what it's called, right? So guess what? That's about.
Straight to the point.
So this is what's about. Listen, and we show people sites of resistance and conflict. We give them examples
Wow.
of like revolutions and mutinies and
Mhm.
successful takeovers against the oppressor. We give people chapter and verse references, books, movies, films, and we link him into where all the money is, because Black history is about money too. Because a lot of the money we have here, you can trace it back to the Caribbean. We can show you the Bank of England, right? It used to be called the Bank of the West Indies because it's full of West Indian plantation money from the sugar business, right? And that's what I mean. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that we talk about.
Wow. I didn't know that about the Bank of England. It used to be called the
It's
Bank
not
of West Indies.
the nickname was the Bank of the West Indies because all the West Indian planters would send back their money to the Bank of England because that's just and also the governors of the Bank of England were often directly involved in slavery too. They were actually
Mhm.
either had ships themselves or investing it, etc. There's one guy called Sir Humphrey Morris, I think his name was. This guy was like he was literally a slave trading ship owner, and he was the Bank of England governor at one time, and he ripped off the bank for about £40 million.
No way. I feel like I'm learning so much today. Thanks for that excellent answer. Second question is, over half of Black Britons can't name a Black history leader. Why do you think this is the case, and what can be done to ensure the next generation are more educated on Black British history?
Right. Well, obviously that has a lot to do with the school system because what you find, what you might have had this yourself, is that if you go to school here, when or if you talk Black history, you'll talk about Black history in America. So you can go to school here and be taught about chapter and verse about Rosa Parks, Luther King, American 55. In fact, that's on the curriculum quite often. You'll be taught that, but they don't teach you about the boycott in Bristol in this country in 63 because we had a
Mm-hmm.
boycott here. So the boycott in America was
Mm-hmm.
55 and the boycott here was 63 in England, but we get taught about the one that's in America. And this is how the history kind of gets messed up because for a lot of people who've been educated in the system here, they will kind of not not assume, but they'll be taught that, oh, if you look at those racist Americans, they're really bad over there, but over here we never had no problem, which is a lie, of course, and that's partly why people are unable to name a couple of Black leaders. But there's a whole bunch of them, and when we talk, in fact, you see this book here again. The biggest chapter in this book is titled African American versus Black British Civil Rights. Because what I realized is that people knew much more about American history than about UK history. So I thought when I did the book, yeah, let me do a kind of comparative timeline between 1945 and 2020, looking at the differences and similarities between the fights for equality in this country compared to America, and just let people see for themselves what is known, what is not known, and why are we less aware of our own history than about American history.
Yeah, fantastic. And can I just say, I mean, imagining me when I was back in school, because I loved history, learning about, like a comparative timeline between the States and the UK is something I absolutely would have definitely appreciated. That is just such a good suggestion for the curriculum. And I'm really glad that's been covered in your book. But you're right. I mean, I guess history, our first steps or our first interaction with history is through the school system, and it is quite Americanized in that sense. And it does make you think, oh, if you're a young, impressionable child, like, oh, they had a lot of issues in America regarding race, but here, it's almost utopian, and that's definitely not the case at all, which is why it's so important to teach like generations and generations, especially children, what Black history is. Can you talk about the challenges and successes you've encountered in working with schools and institutions to include more Black history in their curriculum?
You know, like if you watch a kind of a vampire movie, the
Mm-hmm.
rules of the vampire is that you can kill them with a stick, right? That's a rule. You know, they can't be praying daytime. But the
Yeah.
other rule is this, yeah, that they can't enter your home unless you invite them. And I say that because that's what schools are like when it comes to Black history. You could be the most expert person on Black history, right? You can have 50 books in a TV show, but unless that school invites you, you can't get up in there. You can't get in this.
Yeah.
There was actually a situation with a big majority Black secondary school in South London, and the
Mm-hmm.
teacher who worked there had invited me in to do a talk for Black History Month, right? And the powers that be in that school said that I was not suitable to come in. Meanwhile, I got 2 books out, you know, and 17 years of history. And actually the GCSE book is used in schools. But this particular governing body management, whatever, didn't want to have me up in there. So they said I was inappropriate for the environment. Now,
What ground did they declare you as not like inappropriate? Did they actually lay out their reasons?
they just said inappropriate, not conducive, whatever. And like, even the staff were like, what? How do you explain that? This guy has a book that's used in
Yeah.
by 10,000 pupils in 140 schools, but he's somehow ineligible to enter our school. I think this is the kind of things you have to go through sometimes when it comes to just
Mm.
telling the truth, because all the stuff that's in this book, you can Google it, So when it comes
Yeah.
to that kind of rejection there, that's because they don't want to hear the facts, the truth, the history.
That is exactly what it is. I agree with you, but it's very frustrating how they kind of reframe that as you not being appropriate or you not being, all these vague words, which doesn't really have much ground. But we all know what the truth is. Is that they know the truth, we know the truth, but they don't want to admit that truth. So it just
Mm.
seems very frustrating. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. What's your favorite fact you've learned about London's Black history?
Favorite fact, favorite. I mean, Jordan Bennett. I got 100,000 words, and I'm trying to think of one of them that's my favorite fact to give to you here. I mean, and a good fact that impresses people or makes people think is that the fact that there's been a Black presence here since Roman times 2,000 years ago. So, I mean, in recent times, that information is a bit more known, accessible. But when I started doing the walking tours, people would come on the walks and just look in my face as if I was mad when I said there was a Black presence here 2,000 years ago, right? And I had to pull out,
Yeah.
this book or that book. Whereas nowadays, Professor Olasola's done a great deal of work there and just helped me out a lot, because nowadays I could just kind of pull out his book or pull out his TV series or pull out like a meme of him with the fact that he went up to Yorkshire a while ago and showed there was Black people up in Hadrian's Wall. And I can just have that as a picture, and that it's done, right? I don't have to kind of argue the point. Meanwhile, before that time, I had to argue for half an hour or 10 minutes, whatever. And eventually said, oh, really? Okay, we accept that now. But now it's easy because people like Professor Olasoga and his kind of his reach and his broad appeal, it's easy to get certain points over. But there's other points now you still have the same battle.
Yeah, I actually only learned that fact, I think, about a year ago. Like I wasn't aware as well, to be fair. And when I heard, I was absolutely shocked. I think people probably think like Black people came to the UK maybe, I don't know, the 19th century or so, if they had to probably guess on a quiz or something. So yeah, it's a very interesting fact. So thanks for spotlighting that one. Um, what is an area in London or in the UK that may surprise many people to having a rich Black history?
I'd say Mayfair, St. Paul's Bank, because people told me that when they came on the walk, they chose the St. Paul's Bank walk because they didn't think there'd be any Black history. They were thinking, oh, Brixton, Notting Hill, Hackney there.
Yeah.
They were thinking, oh, what history could there be in St. Paul's? And like that walk is like 3 hours, and because there's so much of it all over there. There's loads of it there. But when it comes to Mayfair now, I mean, people are not fully aware that there was a collective of wealthy Black entertainers that spent time in the Mayfair area who having their own nightclubs. There's a sister called, well, I won't tell you them, but there's a sister who owned her own nightclub in Mayfair back in World War II, 1943.
Yeah, okay, that's even shocking to me. I know there was a wealthy black population in, I think was it Central Park in the States. I've heard about that, or somewhere in New York. Yeah, but Mayfair, I'm like, didn't think it would be that close
Oh,
to home. I didn't know that. It was,
like I said, that one's called Harlem and Mayfair. It's talking about the fact that there was a lot of references to Harlem in Mayfair. I mean, physically, literally, and we show people where the references are.
that wow, that is very interesting. That's a good fact, actually. Would never have guessed that. So this year's theme for Black History Month is about reclaiming narratives. How do you think this can be done through education and history?
That's what we do all day, every day, basically. So I would say the answer is walking tours, films,
Mhm.
talks, helicopters, bus tours, river cruises, interactive presentations, online, face to face. You know, word of mouth, doing what we do, what we Black History Watch does. That is reclaiming the narrative. That's what we do all day long. We always talk about history from a Black perspective, and we link it into the built physical environment in London that you're going to see every day and walk past for the last 25 years, but not realize that this point here links it to St. Lucia or Jamaica or Kenya or Ghana, etc. And we can show how it works, and that's what we do.
Yeah, well said. Honestly, I agree. I think your organization is a definition of reclaiming narratives. I mean, just from our conversation alone, I feel like I've learned so much about Black history. That is a sense of, reclaiming your history. So, yeah, definitely agree with that one. Thanks, Tony. I feel like you've taught me so much here.
Oh well, it's part of the job, I suppose.
You do it very well.